Welcome to our third official podcast of Leading from the Heart. This idea of featuring healers and leaders around the world who are doing work, their world work in a different way. The purpose of this is to inspire us, inspire the world, to shift our consciousness around how we lead and interact with those, especially when we're in a position of influence or power. This podcast is sponsored by the Moksha Group, which is a group of people, including myself, David, and other colleagues that I've kind of pulled in for their expertise to teach the heart practices. I consider it the wisdom practices for our time. And we primarily target organizations, workplaces worldwide to create more love, compassion, healing, courage, I call it. And David has been one of my mentors, teachers, who's dramatically shifted my life, my energy, my health. I had reached out to him when I was really struggling with the illness that I couldn't beat. I don't even know if he knows that, but I had shingle complications for a year. And then after doing practices with David for 2.5, 3 weeks, it shifted, which was quite amazing. Because when you don't have your health or you don't have your well-being, it's really hard to do your heart's work and your leadership work in your home and in your family. So I consider David a master healer, as many people do. He's a Qigong master. He's a coach. He's a mindset coach. He's got an incredible story, his own personal journey, as well as just how he helps others support them and to do their destiny world work. And so I'm so honored that David is here to share more with you. I'm going to first just ask if you can share a little bit more about your background, and then we'll shift into you sharing your story, your journey of awakening your own heart. I'll never forget your story. I share it with others because it's so inspiring, and how you've awakened your own heart and how you've carried that forward through your life. And so here's the floor. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for the listeners who get an opportunity to learn and grow from your story and your wisdom.
Well, thank you, Sheila. Great introduction, and not just for myself, but also for the work. Can really feel you coming from your heart, and those that are sensitive to this kind of work will feel that right away. And those that are craving it will also feel that, although they'll keep it more at a distance. Mm-hmm. Some people will literally be afraid of the message that you're offering, which seems a little crazy on one hand, seems upside down, but it is actually how it is. Like, is this person legit? Is she real? Is this is this just some front she's putting on? But, those that have the sense, you're really just coming from your heart, which means you've done your own healing work. You've discovered yourself, and you've discovered that you and the world have something in common. There's some sort of oneness between the two of you, and you feel compelled to bring healing to others. So a great introduction, not just for me, but to the work. So as far as my journey, it's a long story, but we'll go with a little bit of short with some punchy pieces to it. So for me, a lot of people who do know me, like yourself, they know the story of me being run over by a trailer at 11 or 12 years old, and I jumped out on a hayride. In fact, the anniversary was just here recently. It's Halloween here, not that long ago. And that story in many ways changed my life. And there's a physical story that goes with it. But anytime anyone has an accident, there's no accident to the accident. And our emotions and our emotional state influence everything going on in our life. The people in our life, the places in our life, the events in our life, the situations in our life, the emotional. One of the things that I love about the modern day spiritual teacher, as they call him on the internet or something, is Eckhart Tolle, and something in particular that Eckhart Tolle has brought to the stage for the average person. And it's kind of interesting because right before Eckhart Tolle was brought to the Oprah Winfrey stage, I was actually asked to come on Oprah Winfrey. And it was through my own manifestation, if you will. I had the intention of getting on the show. And then some serendipitous events happened, and someone called me from the Oprah Winfrey show, literally got the phone call from the Oprah Winfrey show. And I answered the phone, and the woman said, I can't remember her name now, but she said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so calling from the Oprah Winfrey show." And she said, "We see you submitted for a couple of things here, da, 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 da." Anyway, she couldn't find my information. She wanted to hear my story. I told her a story that I'm starting to tell you guys. And then they said, "We want you on the show." I decided that as a healer, as a teacher, as a eventual leader, I wasn't emotionally ready. I took a step back. I let it go. Here's this big opportunity. But it was a big opportunity for me to lose myself. And at that time, I saw Eckhart Tolle come onto the stage literally a month after they had asked me to come. And he was ready, you know.
Yeah.
And he brought this idea of what he calls in his book, the pain body, and what I refer to in my book as both the emotional body, which is what it's been referred to for, 2000 plus years from all these master teachers. And I kind of in my book, because I reference Eckhart Tolle too, I say the emotional pain body, just so we understand what we're talking about, because it is the emotional body, but it's also the pain body, because the pain body became like a new term. Anyway, so at the heart of all of this, because what we're talking about the heart. At the heart of all of this is the emotional pain that people are going through. And very few people want to talk about it, especially, men in the world. And, we got to be tough and like all this kind of stuff, shove it down and all this. Anyway, so I was in a lot of emotional pain, and I manifested, I attracted an experience that demonstrated on the outside what I was feeling on the inside. And many people do that. And if you could be preventative about this, which I think at any time in anyone's life, including me right now here today, you and I are both doing preventative medicine so that we don't have to have some bigger physical event that happens on the outside to demonstrate how much pain we're in on the inside. So I want to point that out because it's a big part of where eventually I'll discuss my work goes and what I do with people. Most people try and put on fronts, and they put on, they talk to themselves in the mirror, whether they're the great salesperson or how great they are and all this other stuff. But those of us that are in the psychology field, especially if we maybe even have some alternative understanding of psychology, Eastern philosophy, and so on, we understand that what really rules a person, and therefore rules their world, is their subconscious mind, not their conscious mind. You could tell somebody who doesn't like themselves very much and isn't very successful to go look in the mirror and talk about how successful they are. And that, for the most part, doesn't work very well. If you have somebody who literally does it 10, 20, 30,000 times, they may see some progress. But for the most part, it's talking to the wind. It doesn't fully resonate with a person. So I first just want to point out that in the physical accident, which caused me to have what the doctors called a severe spinal disease, a severe degenerative spinal disease that lasted from the time I was 15 to 25 years old. I had a physical disease filled with arthritis in my spine and everything. At 25 years old, they said, your spine looks like you're 85 years old. And I saw it. It looked like my grandmother's spine. Actually, my spine looked worse than my 90-year-old grandmother's spine. My grandmother, when she got to be 91, she had like stenosis and different things, arthritis in her spine. It honestly looked like a quarter of how bad my spine looked when I was 25. So from 15 to 25 years old, I was studying traditional Chinese medicine, Qigong, meditation, shamanic practices, various forms, therefore, of also meditation and prayer work and intentioning and so on. martial arts practices. At 21 years old, started studying psychology at the University of Connecticut. Eventually went on to study molecular cellular biology for 4 years at the University of Colorado. Emergency medical technician training, supervisor at a hospital, therapist, facilitating treatment groups. Right there in the middle of that, 25 years old now. And they say, essentially, you've been practicing these things for 10 years. Of course, they didn't say any of that, but this is kind of like what I heard, right? You've been practicing this for 10 years and you haven't made any progress, and your spine has gotten worse and worse and worse. And the prognosis is in the next 5 years or less, your spine is going to crush your lungs. You're going to need to move to a home or whatever. Somebody's going to have to care for you because literally your internals are 85 years old. And I just went, holy cow. And so I certainly had a tremendous amount of emotional pain, tried various forms, all kinds of therapy, including counseling and, trying to heal, PTSD and things of this nature. And, intense bullying experiences when I was growing up and, both at home and then outside the home. And so now take those 10 years worth of practices and add another 3. That gives us 13 years. Not to say it's going to take everybody else 13 years, but it took me 13. 13 years later, well, let's say 10 years later. 10 years later, I realize I have to go more internal. I'm fighting full contact karate. Yeah. I'm meditating and doing all the other healing work, but the heart, man, is like a turtle shell. Yeah. It's just a turtle shell. And so I got involved in more internal healing practices. We'll just say that simply, meditative, internal Qigong practices and so on, breathing practices, pranayama, yogic, internal Kundalini yoga-like practices. And short version of the story is I had a series of experiences, probably about 10 of them, where which led into others, but 10 all right in a row over, say, 6 months or something, maybe a year. And they were just profound. I literally was transported away from my body. Some might say into my body. My awareness of myself as an energy being was exponential. When I was a teenager, I had a 2-year bout of experimenting with drugs and alcohol, including LSD and other things, mushrooms. Never had these kinds of experiences doing those things. Wanted to, was looking for that kind of relief. Never found it. And when I returned to my physical awareness of like the physical body, I have hands, I have feet. Because it's not like, in one sense, like I seem to go far away, but at the same time, like I could like sense myself here, but I could also sense myself going in every direction. And it's hard to describe, but that's, So when I came back, especially at that time, I would, like, let's say I was in my body, so to speak, then I have this dramatic experience. Then I would like sort of like return to the awareness of my physical body, and it would be like, like gasping for air, like almost like I died and like I was like coming back to life or something. And over the years, that has become like nil. Like it's hard to, like I can tell there's a coming, going, there's an expansion, there's a contraction, but there's like no fear about it. It's very ecstatic. Anyway, over the course of those next 3 years, I continue to have those types of experiences. One day I was standing by the river. My father came to visit. He saw me standing there with my shirt off in the summer. And, for all those years, he had seen my back with a big bow in the spine. And from the time of the accident. And he said, "Oh my God." And I literally was like a bear, like what, And he's like, your spine, it's healed. It's straight. It's straight, he said.
Yeah.
And the last piece that I'll just throw in on this run is that the one of the most dramatic experiences which exemplifies the opening of the heart and the healing of the spine was during a session where I was having some healing work done, and my heart chakra, which I knew what one was, but I really hadn't felt it like that ever before. All of a sudden, it was a whirlpool in my chest of energy, and my eyes were closed, and my mind's eye, my third eye, was filled with these very luminescent greens, emerald green, and very profound, bright, luminescent yellows. And they were dancing with each other. And these are related to the third and fourth chakras within the yogic system and so on, and some of the Qigong systems. And there it was, and it was just filling my head with light. And it was profound. And so as far as my story, there's a little taste of it.
Yeah. It's an incredible story. And the parts of it that really landed with me, and then also when I'm sharing and working with others, is that, well, change can take time. I know you would teach us a lot, like we're creating a tipping point. And, one of the things I remember you saying to me is it took you a while to get into this state, right? And it might take you a little while. And one of the gifts I often try to share with leaders when I'm teaching them well-being practices is one of the gifts you gave to me, I think, around encouraging leadership is that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be completely healed to be able to share what you're learning with others, that your healing becomes exponential, right? Our evolution, increases when we're sharing what we're learning with others. And that a lot of when I work with leaders or teams, I'm thinking of a lot of people when I even teach them self-regulation or co-regulation, they're really scared to open their mouth. They're so vulnerable to share something that they know with others, fear of judgment, fear that they're not good enough. And one of the things I think you do when you share your story of just how, through that process of your own healing, you were, if I remember right, you were witnessing and seeing other people completely cure and heal themselves from really hard illnesses, diseases, cancer, other things like that, while you were still on your own healing journey, hadn't fully actualized that. And I think that's an area where your wisdom of like carrying on, not giving up, that tenacity or endurance, perseverance, is a real gift for people, because most of us are still healing, right? As we're helping and leading others to a more conscious way of living, being, and working. So if you want to add anything around that piece.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's beautiful. Well said, and keen insights there, and really important, juicy stuff. So absolutely, as far as the reference to my personal world, at 15 years old, there I am diagnosed with scoliosis. And I immediately start applying what I'm learning to my family at home. My family at home, they were afraid to go to doctors, and they wouldn't go to healers. They wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't go to counselors, so on. I mean, that's why I started psychology in the first place. And the other disciplines was to literally bring them home to my house. And I started doing this work on other people. And I often here's another juicy piece. I often hear people say, like, you can't do healing with your parents or on your family members because it's a boundary issue and so on. And I understand that, because in some cases you just can't, because it's too traumatic. But you want to talk about a story of compassion, my personal story of compassion. I did it, and I did it for years. And we had a table in my house, and like massage table. And I began working on family and friends, and everything that I was learning, the massage techniques, the Reiki techniques, the polarity techniques, the Qigong techniques, the medical Qigong, the shamanic work, everything that I was learning, I immediately brought it and started to apply it to other people. And one thing that I would say about people who are hesitant to do that, as you referenced, there's always somebody 1 or 2 steps behind you. It's that simple. And chances are within any group, if you're talking to a group of 3, chances are one person can benefit from what you're saying. And it doesn't even matter if the 2 other people, and granted, this takes some wisdom and some time and everything and some confidence, but eventually it doesn't really matter if there's 2 people who don't like it. You know, if you help that one person, that's all that matters. So it's kind of like it's really understanding humility. It's like being humble and planting a seed. You're not always going to get to see the seed grow into a tree. You know, so I planted a lot of seeds, and during that time from 15 to 28, even when I tell people, you know, that all these people around me started having these healings, people were literally coming in, and there was some stuff that you, for lack of better words, you'd have to call it like a miracle, because like, I don't know how it happened exactly. I did what I did, and then something happened, and then like, wow, like, and people would go and they'd say, I have this thing, and you know, I've been to the doctors and 3 doctors, and they don't know, blah, blah, blah. And I just, okay, well, let me see what I can do. And I'd like do something. And then all of a sudden there'd be a change in it. They go back to their doctors a lot of times, like the next day or 3 days later or whatever. And then the doctor would say, it's gone. And then we'd be looking at literally like an x-ray or whatever the thing is. And it's like totally changed. And this was also with animals too. Okay. Dogs primarily. Every once in a while, a cat or a bird or something, sometimes a rabbit, but a lot of times with dogs. And because I was a dog person too. I had 3 cats too. But anyway, but yeah, I myself, at the end of the day, because at that time I was doing all that work for free. I didn't charge anything until I was like 31 years old or something. I would cry at the end of the day. Yeah. Because these people had these miracles, they had these healings, and I was in so much pain, and I was so uncomfortable. But as you pointed out, resilience, fortitude, no choice, kept going, and I achieved the tipping point. And lastly, I would just say that even though I have, you know, my 3 different black belts, advanced martial arts disciplines, psychology background, all these things I just listed off, I'm still healing. Yeah. I'm not enlightened. I'm not the Buddha. I haven't disappeared. There's work to be done. My heart didn't just open and I saw God, which I did. But then I've arrived, and now I try and pretend I'm better than everyone else. No. I still get angry. I still get sad. I just don't get hung up on it as much. Yeah. And I don't let it stick around long enough to create disease. Yeah, and that's a skill.
That is a skill. Lately, I've been kind of waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm just in that like twilight phase. And I keep hearing that wisdom voice saying, let go as fast as you can. I felt like it was like a download, because I had an experience where I got stuck. Something got stuck and stuck in my body, and kind of in a hyper aroused state a bit. And even doing some of the slow practices, my body just didn't want to do it. You know, it was because I was just stuck. And that came in, and it was like a very strong voice of letting go as quickly as you can. And then since that, I kind of heard that. I did your practice this morning on your YouTube channel, you know, walking the mind down. And it was just that idea of support. I'm thinking of a practice that a lot of the practices I teach in a corporate environment when I'm working with teams or individual coaching are Qigong related, and it's things you've taught me. And one that's really interesting, especially I find, after waterfall, drawing energy down, walking the mind down. But this one that you share, maybe you can give some insight to it. It's, you're standing post, maybe you call it something different, but hands over the heart. And for working up to 7 minutes of that kind of stillness and the relaxed stance. And what I found, especially when working with leaders who have a lot of heart, but when they're stressed, they can go up into that upper anger, their imbalanced emotion that can get stuck as anger, agitation, frustration, power over, right? So for those leaders, I find what's really powerful to help them stay in their heart and kind of alchemize alchemize that kind of intensity is, a few rounds of kind of waterfall energy, but then this holding. And I remember doing this with you. I think we worked up to like maybe 10 minutes. But the emotion comes up, the pain of the neck and the shoulder, the sweating, the shaking of the body. But what I found then with folks is when they have these emotions that come up, they have an action impulse. They want to act them out, especially if they're in that anxious, angry, rage state. And what I think you've taught and teach many people is, how do you ground, and how do you know that you're bigger? This is something called bigger mind, or that you're bigger than the emotion. And that kind of that container that you create, I find it much easier when you have a coach or support who's talking you through it, the bigger mind, so that it's extremely empowering to finally break a pattern of reactivity. Because most people I coach, because they're really great people. They know what to do, and then their emotions get the best of them, and they either underserve or they go into undercare or overcare, but they're not kind of showing up in a consistent way that people feel inspired by or emotionally safe. So that one practice is something I use a lot, and for myself, but also with others. I think it's transformational. But any insight to what's actually happening when people do some of these practices that you share in the world? Like that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, great questions. One of the things that because of my practices, that has caused me to stand out, so to speak, in a particular way. One of those things, of course, is the fact that I achieved something that seemed impossible. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big one. But the other part is that I'm a very body-centered practitioner. Mm-hmm. We have martial arts background, extensive. We have Qigong background, extensive. Meditation practice is body-centered. Mm-hmm. And yes, I have the Western and Eastern psychologies, which is helpful, and the Western science. It's helpful to have that information, to dialogue with people and lead them to the cup of tea. But when it comes to actually tasting the tea, we need to actually get into our bodies, because most of us are out of our bodies without even realizing we're out of the body. We're like half out of the body. So we've all done this. You're walking through the kitchen and you stub your toe. You're not really in your body. Mm-hmm. You pick up the cup of coffee, you spill it on yourself. On the way out the door, you stick the cup of coffee back. Oh, geez, I have to change my shirt? You change your shirt. You scoot out the door. You're rushing out the door. You're dropping stuff. You're not really in your body, and that is a form of being ungrounded. And in the New Age community, the word grounded is used quite a bit. But many people in the New Age community are not very grounded. So it's kind of an interesting, anyway. So when we have ideas like grounding, and we have ideas like centering, coming back to our center. Center is like, deep center is like being at the bottom of the lake. Whereas the top of the lake is all jumbled up with all kinds of emotions and stirring and all of this. But what's really interesting is that within every human being, the deep lake is there the whole time. So then what is the difference between the average person who's living on the surface and the average person who's living more deeply? It's about where are they placing their awareness. Because, and I don't want to get too complicated here, but I will say this for those that can catch it. The human being is an amplifier, and they will amplify whatever they cling to, hang on to, focus on. So if they're focusing on the still lake with some training, they will amplify the experience and the energy of the still lake. If they only stay focused on the surface, and everything's bumpy and so on. So take a leader, for example, that's focused on the surface. Well, then they have to do all kinds of imposter syndrome activities to pretend they're centered and grounded and powerful when they're not. And think about this for a moment. How easy is it to fool a dog?
Right.
If you tell a dog to sit and you don't have alpha energy and you're powered and centered and they don't trust you, they're not going to sit. You can raise your voice, you can pound your feet, stomp your feet, and they'll run away. Okay. It's not any different with other humans, because a lot of times what people are talking about, and again, this is something that's different with my teaching, and it's the embodiment of wisdom, because if somebody really has wisdom and you have a little bit of, sensitivity to these things, then for example, very easily that I'm talking from a place of wisdom because you feel what I'm talking about. My words are congruent with the energy that I am putting forth.
Yeah.
But what happens is you get people who are coming to these, they don't have practices like this or other practices to center themselves to the deeper part of the lake, change their biology, their biochemistry, their brain, their heart rate, their temperature, and then come back to a deeper sense of internal self. And so they're constantly riding that surface, and every day is like, oh my God, I hope people don't figure it out. So you have a lot of people playing that.
I love that version of like imposter syndrome. I think you're right. I mean, that's something probably, 80% of people admit to feeling, and from a neuroscience perspective, we know, like as a mammal, when someone who we perceive has power over us is saying one thing, but we feel their neurochemicals or we feel it's not congruent, that's like the worst condition, right?
Yes.
And those who have kids, I think it's like, when you're saying everything's okay, but the kids can kind of feel that you're not okay, they're actually very ungrounded and unstable. I also want to just address something you said about, awareness. So for leaders, when we talk about their ability, or parents or significant others, I know that a lot of people who go to yoga, who've done meditation, I'm thinking of one leader that I work with, it was a CFO, or CIO, actually. He had a very rich personal meditation practice. But when he showed up at work, it's almost like he put on the corporate. He shared this corporate guy, and there was no permission. He would be rejected. It wasn't the right fit. And he had 20% engagement of his whole department. And once he learned to bring those practices into permission, so it wasn't like two different people, into the workplace, which was really for him a lot of self-compassion work and vulnerability work for him. And then softening, and then having more of this like we instead of that power over, because that imposter syndrome piece you're talking about. In 7 months, they went to 80% engagement, which is kind of unheard of. And they were the top performing department in the entire company, because he, as a leader, one, had support. Two, he was able to deepen his existing practices and have permission to lead from that. So this is one area I'd love you to kind of speak to, because I remember I was always nervous to do my practices when teaching. And you'd be like, okay, if you're going to do this work, you have to be comfortable being weird. You have to be comfortable being the one who is, and laugh at yourself and make jokes, but it will help evolve the group. So I'd like you to share a couple of things. One, people who do have some sense of practice and they're nervous to bring it into work. How do they kind of shift that mindset? And then that second part really is like, why is that so needed right now? Because that's what I feel. I feel an urgency that people, don't let fear get in the way, but that they don't compartmentalize their work self and their home self for that integration. So anything that
great, great stuff. Yeah. So first thing I would say is going back to the the individual that you worked with, that you're speaking to there, and his transformation, which is awesome. This is one of the reasons too why I like the Qigong practices.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of seated meditation as well, myself, fair amount of it. I try and average about an hour to an hour and a half a day when I can, but then there's times where other things are going on and I skip it for a little while, but then I'm very eager to get back to it. And I literally might put in a 3-hour session, like on the weekend. So I'm definitely dedicated to the seated meditation practices. But at the same time, I'm always engaged in these physical movement practices. Not only is this good for your bones, your blood, your balance, longevity of the physical body, but it really caters to being able to move through space, the workplace, getting in and on, off or on the elevator, moving through, in between and outside of desks, walking into a room, walking out of a room. How you walk into a room, whether it's a grocery store or it's a place where you are playing that leadership role, or you're getting out of your car to pump gas, everyone around you is scanning your body language. Everybody around you is sizing you up. And so it's not about like, being like on defense all the time because everybody's looking at me. But if you ever, and you've seen me come into rooms before and walk around them and so on, I'm not a dancer. My daughter's really into dance now. She's the dancer. She's poised in her way, but in my own way, I'm poised. Mm-hmm. I have a particular way in which I stand, in which I carry myself. I'm not overly, if I had to describe myself a little, I'm not overly like aggressive in any way, but you can clearly look at me. And if you take just a moment to look at me, even when I don't even know, I do not look like someone you can easily take advantage of. There's something about my energy that also doesn't look like a victim. So I don't look like a victimizer or a bully, but I also don't look like a victim. And it's about how you move through a space. And so the more you work with your body consciously and deliberately in certain ways, the more that you bring that with you wherever you go. So many times I'll be walking, I'll be coming out of the men's room or something, or going into it, or in and out of a locker room, or in and out of the grocery store. And as I go to walk around the corner, I literally can feel somebody's energy coming, and I stop, and boom, they walk right in front of me. And you know what's very interesting is how many times people will stop, and I'm not dressed like this. I just have my normal like clothing on or whatever. And they literally will stop and they're like, "Oh, excuse me, sir." And they bow. They actually bow, which is very interesting. Be obvious if I look like a Sifu, but I'm not dressed at all like that. And it's amazing how many people will actually bow and sort of like, because they can feel the energy. Anyway, so that is definitely different than just seated meditation. That comes from moving and working with the body in so many ways, that when you're picking up the coffee, when you're literally picking up a pen, when you're about to say something to people, do you pause? And then go?
Yeah.
Or you just come in talking? Because if you just come in talking, you're talking at people. These are things that if you work with your body more, you can embody these things of courage and divine intelligence and heart space. And these things that for a lot of people, they sit on the shelf.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many like side roads where we could go, but one of the things that I've been able to do is share, just waterfall and Wei Chi practice, kind of two that I probably teach every single person I work with. And I do a lot of training around heart math and using a biofeedback monitor to measure your personal coherence, as well as with teams, they can all wear that and measure our collective coherence, which is like, how are we in a place of ease? Are we in a place of synced up? Is our is our thalamus part of our brain operating clearly, and our whole brain from side to side, bottom up function, not in a fight, flight, freeze, or like fix it state. And what it's so interesting, sometimes when I'm just seated and I'm really just focusing on the breath, feeling it coming in, I can do it. Other times, if my emotion or the carryover stress is really strong, or I've had some pretty intense arguments, or I have a teenage daughter who, sometimes we love deeply and then we, have our moments. I can't get there as quick. But if I just mentally, this is one thing that I love about Qigong. Once you have the embodiment of it, sometimes I can just stand and I can mentally do it on my biofeedback monitor, Wei Qi in particular. The coherence score, 3 is considered coherent. It goes like 8, which is like way above just from being able. So there's now these biofeedback tools that can show kind of the real benefit. And because what I think a lot of people don't know, I was talking to, I'm a yoga teacher for over 20 years. And when I tried to bring yoga into teamwork, there was sometimes a barrier because of perceived religion. I think it's bigger than any of that. Or even some of the physical practices were too intense, or sometimes there was like 30% who would say no, right? But my experience of having a team who we're going to do executive team meaning we need to do planning. If we do 10 to 20 minutes of Qigong as a prep, you're creating group coherence, individual coherence, group coherence. And the other thing I learned from the shamanic world was that so many of us walk through the world feeling completely alone and unsupported. And therefore, when people fail you, right? When people fail you in the moment, you can feel really isolated. But with Qigong, at least for me, the shamanic version too, is I'm feeling the connection of the earth to the horizon point, to the stars and the moon, and to energy. I'm feeling my own love and support to my body. I'm feeling my body get better and healthier. And I'm not so dependent or needy in a way of approval. I have more of a window of tolerance. And so using these practices with teams, I have found never have I ever been asked not to do it. They ask for it repeatedly because it can get them unstuck, like you were saying, very quickly. And it just creates this kind of sense of like, I'm okay. I'm actually maybe better than okay. And so if we can shift to some of not shift, but like add in some of these experiences around, you were sharing with me recently about working with a team, where you were kind of sharing these practices with a team and how much need there is, especially folks kind of in a corporate environment. If you can speak a little bit to like the need for this work and kind of what it's like to apply in settings where people just aren't nourished. They're not used to being nourishing or self-nourishing as much.
Yeah, again, excellent. And again, we could go in many side directions.
I know, right?
We could just go on all day.
We could.
But yeah, so specifically here, a couple things that hit me when you were talking there. One is this analogy that I've made many times. This idea of being a cup. Like in Asia, there's this conversation about the cup that overfloweth. And in order for a cup to overflow, you have to have a full cup. Mm-hmm. Then it tips and then it goes out. And to me, centering practices like Qigong, martial art, yoga, meditation, things like this. Again, if we use that idea of coming back, what I would call to our center, the deep part of the lake, the more that we come back to that, and in some schools and teaching and so on, that would be called like presence, coming back to our presence. You have to come back to stillness before presence becomes a thing. Presence is energy. It's palpable. But in order to have that presence there, whether it's with a leader or individual, you have to first access the stillness and then amplify the stillness, and then we get presence. That'd be one way of using some language that people might be familiar with. Yeah. But so there's also this idea, though, of the cup. So many of us, how many people grew up with like everything they wanted and they needed and so on. You know, most people, no. Even if they had lots of material stuff, it was like, you know, you're going to go to college and you're going to do this and you're going to, you know, and it was just everything. It's not heart-centered. It's missing the heart. The heart is not there. So these practices are all heart-centered because it's about coming back to your own body. Mm-hmm. And without going into too many details right now, but you mentioned heart math and Qigong and so on. It's very important for people to realize that we have the brain, which is so important, obviously, to our entire nervous system. But we also have the heart, like in heart math, pointing out that this is just, in many ways, possibly even more important than the brain. So we have brain, so important. We have heart, so important. And then the area of my expertise as well talks about this area called lower dantian, which now we're calling the second brain. And many scientists saying that this area of the second brain is more important than the first brain, that the second brain should be called the first brain because there's so much happening there. And that goes back to what I was referring to at the beginning with emotions and energy and all of this. Anyway, we need to learn to work with these things. And when you make a Qigong movement on the level that it is, as you pointed out, with the stars and the earth and so on, that's somebody who's more earthy, connected, nature-oriented, shamanic. But even if you took the person who's like, okay, like I don't really get it, whatever, they can make the same movement. And because it is a holistic movement, you are moving the body in synchrony with breath. Yeah. You start to become more holistic throughout your different centers. Second brain down here, heart here, third eye here. And even though there are mysteries to Qigong and so on the level that there are, and mysteries to meditation and so on, when I look at the movements, because I'm an athlete, I've competed in different kinds of athletics and so on, not just martial arts, but running and Spartan events and partial marathons and, you know, pretty close to almost a marathon. Anyway, all these different things. And moving the body in synchrony with breath, learning to do it brings power. It brings confidence, whether or not you ever hit the baseball. Martial artists will make one movement over with breath, which is really Qigong. They're not punching or kicking. It's Qigong. It's Qigong. And instead of like being disembodied, they're embodying, becoming more powerful, more strong, more powerful. And as their energy grows, they fill their own cup with what? Life force, energy, chi, breath, blood, lymphatics are moving, confidence is moving. You know, all of it. And then they're standing taller. When I saw this group the other day, taught about 40 something people, just adjacent to the beach here in Wrightsville Beach and Wilmington. And, they were obviously computer people. When we went to go like this and go do a waterfall, or what they sometimes call bringing down the heavens, I like to call the waterfall, like we're standing in a waterfall. Here comes the water. They're like, oh, the agony in the arms. And I just thought, my God, what even is this? Like, but because without judgment, but just for myself, I'm thinking, my God, if I was in that situation, like, this is so painful. This is so like, painful. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be. What are we sacrificing? Like if our cup has a drop of tea in it and we just keep giving, what do they say when we get on the plane? If something happens, put the oxygen mask on yourself, right? So many people know that. The leaders know that. But then take a group of leaders. Let's say we have 100 leaders. Put them in a room. And we say, all right, we're going to have this conversation. And they're like, yeah. And maybe they've been to Tony Robbins. They understand about changing state. They understand about getting in your body and changing state And in Tony Robbins, he maybe has you do something silly with some light sticks in your hand. And I'm going to make you do something silly and pretend you're in a waterfall and breathe. But it's about embodiment, and it's about changing your state, right? But in the process of changing your state, you're in there, you're changing the energy, you're changing the blood, you're changing the chemistry. You take a group of 100 people, bring them together, and then ask those leaders how many of them know that. Almost all of them, let's say 90 out of 100 will say, yes, I understand. Yes, I know. We ask them questions about it. They answer the right questions. You should first put the mask on yourself before you put it on other people. But then ask how many of them actually do it.
Right.
And you watch it's everything, the table turns. Literally, you might have 2 out of 100 that say, I feel confident in the fact that I do this on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's true. And I think a lot of it comes to the overculture, how we've been conditioned, early childhood stuff. I know for me, as an early social worker, someone like really working with very traumatized people and not even understanding my history and my family of origin trauma, that I was like a bucket that had literally holes in it. So before I became really deep into my healing, Qigong has helped me a ton with this. So is heart math, but I would do hours and hours of practice and I would get this full cup of energy. But then one person who triggered my core wound, my unhealed trauma, the bucket would almost like pour out, either spill over, dump over, or leak out the bottom. So years of kind of my sustainability practice was like healing those little wounds at the bottom of the bucket, or that arousing energy. And so, so I find, maybe it just reflected in my journey when I'm working with leaders, we can get them to feel stronger in themselves and self-care with their practice. And one of the reasons I really want people to then share what they're learning with the people around them, because then I feel people go into protection to preserve what they have that half a cup of tea, right? And they can't throw everybody away, their family, and so that desire to kind of bring people along as they're willing to change, integrate into your life, because I feel like you can do a lot of work on your own, but there is, at least for me, still a feeling of needing to protect, because if I'm around too many people too long who have very dysregulated energy, it affects me. And then I have to do longer and longer practice. And so any coaching you can give people who feel like they're pretty good on their own with their routine, but then when they enter a workplace, so let me give you an example. Working with women, I do a lot of women coach. The only women I ever work with, or I shouldn't say that, the only people I ever work with that get referred from HR are women. Usually men aren't, referred to HR for showing a temper or being dominant or strong. But women very quickly get in trouble and are often referred to coaching. And I love actually coaching people like that. But one of the things I think could be really, as you weave in and respond, but like one thing that's helped me and help others win around that is putting my hands on my pelvis, feeling my feet. And like, I'm not going to do waterfall in in a room full of like, we're sitting there, but I'm being challenged, I'm being poked, and kind of that immature dominant energy coming out. I'm the only woman in the room. And one of the things, if I'm on a good day, I can remember to put my hands on my belly, pour chi in, pour chi in, pour chi in. Then I kind of make it through, but I'm still kind of tired afterwards. So any coaching for people who experience those things?
Yeah, this is excellent. And this gets more into like the actualization of these practices in the marketplace or the workplace or whatever the case may be, right? And so the first thing that I always say is that you have to have the solo training time. You have to have the quiet time before you can find meditation on a busy subway. It's that simple. You have to really learn. You have to have some, it'd be like taking a martial arts student and giving them all the techniques the first day and then sending them out the door and expecting them to be able to defend themselves. It's very not realistic. Yeah. These things have to be ingrained in your body. That's why the beauty of this work is there's a practice that we come back to and center around. We center around the practice of centering, and we keep coming back to it, and we keep coming back to it, and we keep coming back to it. And first of all, when a person goes and leaves their practice, let's say they have a little bit of a more regular practice, then they leave their practice and they realize they've lost their center. Then they go home and they go back to their centering practice. That is priority number one.
Okay.
That's like step number one before we can move to step number two. Step number two is, how do I hang on to my practice longer once I enter the environment? Well, this actually gets a little more advanced because it's juggling a few more balls, but I'll give you a hint to a couple things that people could master. But again, it's not going to be done in a day, but I'll give you a hint to a couple things people could master. One of the quickest ways to take on someone else's energy, you're in an elevator with them, you're in an office with them. They're starting to dominate your energy in whatever way, shape, or form. One of the ways Tony Robbins will say this is he says, when somebody comes into a meeting, there's one person that's going to dominate that space. So if it's two people, one person's going to dominate it, one person's going to be more powerful. So you have people jostling for that kind of position in like a competitive sort of sense, right? But there's another way, the master's way. The master's way is number one, we enter the room with the idea that there is no competition. I'll even allow you to think you're winning. And this is, again, it's going to take some practice, but we started this with the idea of heart center. This is a very heart-centered practice. It's also a practice of what we would call in Qigong, we would call it Wu Ji, which is infinite space. So I can give you the verbiage of it. We'd have to train it longer to really grasp it. You would have it, but somebody else, it would take some training. But this is the idea. I come into a room, and not as the master, but as a regular person. I come into the room. I've done my practice, just like you were talking about with social work. I did that too at the Lock Facility Psych Hospital I was working at. You did all this great work. You come in, and then right away, people are like sucking like with a straw off of your energy field, right? They want to suck all your light, right? So the quickest way to take on that energy and become part of the conflict is to immediately take on the idea that you have something to defend. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but to some it definitely will. But I see I'm doing it. I can't help it. You have to embrace something bigger. You have to embrace the whole room. You can't make it a tight, so imagine in the room, there's something you don't like. It's a big room. There's 100 people in there. There's one person you really don't like. And then you also can't stand the whole crowd. The whole crowd's bothering you. One person in particular you really don't like. And then the whole crowd, man, they're just stealing all your energy. You have to, what I like to call, very simple in meditation terms, mind your own business. My business is what is my breath doing? My business is what are my feet doing? My business is what am I thinking about you? If I am projecting, we know the terms in psychology, if I am projecting unto you that you are not going to like me, then I am causing problems. Let's listen to what I said again. Yeah. If I am projecting unto you, who I've never even met maybe, that you don't like me, or maybe I've worked with you and you seem to insinuate constantly that you don't like me. Okay? If I start to have the idea that you don't like me, that's actually a projection of me onto you. And now I'm making it that you don't like me. Do you know what the only problem with you not liking me is? Is if I don't like me. And if I'm not okay with me, and if I don't have compassion for you that you don't like me, because it's not about you really not liking me. It's about you having issues with someone that I seemingly remind you of. So can I be a healer for you in that moment, even as a stranger? I can't tell you how many times people see me on YouTube or they see me wherever they see me, and they send some little negative note. I mean, usually I get positive ones, but every once in a while you get somebody who says, hey, you're this, that, the other thing. And, but what's funny is that they will say, for example, you're a X, Y, and Z, and then they'll say, but you had something interesting to say about this. And then I will literally respond back to all of them as if they sent me the nicest email ever.
Yeah.
And I offer them a technique. And I can't tell you how many times that turns people around. If I'm in an office where I can't give someone a technique, just by not taking it, I love the little book, The 4 Agreements. Mm-hmm. What is the first agreement? I believe it's the first one. Do not take things personally. It's not about you. So learning to stay in our heart space when possible. If not, learning to at least stay grounded and be in our lower dantian and this is where the dance comes in, and that's why we can't, we can only give hints to it here. We can't teach people how to do it this quickly, right? But having the tools, the techniques, the methods, and understanding key concepts like grounding, like heart-centered practice, including compassion and presence and presencing, including the idea of cooperation, including the idea of being the bigger cup, and simultaneously understanding what it means to have boundaries. And being clear with your boundaries. First and foremost with yourself, which is what it means to mind your own business. And then secondly, extending that to other people. And eventually, if people are interested, learning the subtle details that I pointed out, which is some people are going to have to meditate on for a while. If I am thinking that you are going to think badly of me, that is called projection. I am not minding my own business. I'm getting involved in your business, and I'm making you the judge of me, thereby separating you from me, and I am getting into trouble. So when I was in that hospital and I was working there for 3 years, when I first entered, I had a very similar experience to what you were talking about. As the 3 years went on, because that was around that time where I healed my spine, I literally got to the place where I had many people ask me, why do the CEOs like you? Why does the day staff like you? The afternoon staff likes you? The kids like you? Because you're not a pushover. You're not an ass kisser. Why is this happening? And it was because of these practices that I did behind the scenes. I would never, I'd catch myself thinking somebody's going to think something. No, it's none of my business what you, Sheila, think about me. It's my business what I think about you. And whatever I think about you, it's going to influence my heart. It's either going to close it or it's going to open it. It's either going to put me in a place of power or it's going to make me weak. And if I make myself weak, you are going to naturally want to attack me.
Man, this is the heart of so many of the turnaround teams that we work with. It's when we do, if we're working with the team, we'll interview each member for a hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. And the areas where there's real pain, where they're stuck, it's their pain body got stuck on something someone did or something said that made them feel like they're not loved and accepted. They feel unsafe. And then they carry that for years, and then they retell the story over and over again. And then other people get involved, and maybe there was one incident. And so they keep, I don't mean they, but we keep, Joe Dispenza's work, we keep recreating our reality over and over again. And then that becomes memorized. And then we see that person and we go into avoidance, or we go into fake connection to the P's response that happens. And it's really exhausting for people. And so what I find is any practice, if I'm leading a team through a repair practice, whether it's Qigong, whether it's heart math, and we actually get the nervous system, really to be able to ask for forgiveness. Now we're going to the deeper, but to actually, it's so freeing for someone to be able to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Would you give me a redo? what I should have said was this, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. And then the other thing is like, I think people have, because that armored heart you talk about, especially when I work with a lot of men, where I see male leaders and male teams like totally flourishing. It's this opening. It's actually being able to take accountability, ask for forgiveness, and being given it. Because that is kind of, I think, something new for our culture. And then they practice actually saying, not that stoic, I accept your apology. I take in what you wish you would have done. And then I see tears. I see softening. And then it goes into how they talk with their fathers, how they talk with their children. It goes, it's a state shift in a way, but it's a permission to take that armor off. And so when I think about how you can help, I mean, you already have helped thousands of people. If you ever have the luxury or or you choose really to study with David, I mean, it's very inspiring when you go. Most of the teachers that train under him have had remarkable, miraculous recoveries for things, and so they're so committed to their own practice, but also sharing. And there's great humility, and I find everybody who's with you teaching and sharing and the power of, I know for me, one of the deeper, I've been doing yoga my whole life and had a huge Kundalini, I don't know if you remember, but a huge Kundalini heart opening experience that in front of a whole group of people, I've never had anything like that in my life. And there was just the sweetest feeling of like joy and connection to everyone and everything, and no ability to hold angst, And so there is real power and being able to resource with you to go deeper. But I also want to let people know and also hear from you that David is a great coach. And so the people I tend to refer to him are people who are who want to feel better, who want to have better boundaries, who want to understand how to do practice, who have had a lot of challenges in their life, current challenges. Because one of the things you said to me, it's like, can you be the bigger wave? Can you be the bigger wave, to what's happening in your life? And when you do your practice, your arms are up, right? And can you feel that someone's holding your hand, can you be bigger than the dysfunction or the coping mechanism or the reactivity? And, I'm getting better at being the bigger wave. And so I find like who you're so great for many people, but people who need to know that they have the capacity to be bigger than their history, their past, their pain. And then you're amazing in working with teams and groups at offsites, and you do tend to blend. As we finish up, can you talk about like how you would work with a team or individuals, executive teams or coaching, and how you might blend this like Qigong with kind of relevant issues that they face on how they lead, but also how they communicate together?
Yeah. So again, good stuff and good questions. And yes, I definitely remember Asheville, and you and the woman right next to you. You chose to be part of that demonstration, and it was very powerful for both of you and for all of us. So one thing I would say, you started to lead in with some of the questioning, asking like about the people that I coach, because some folks know me as a healer and that kind of thing. And so I get a lot of folks coming to me for 30 plus years now, professionally, coming for, counseling, healing, physical conditions, so on. Having said that, all of those people I ended up coaching for the most part, at least 90% of them, ended up becoming coaching clients. And when I look back at those clients, who are they? They are, and you can see a lot of those testimonials in my book as well. And then of course on our website and so on, but they're literally doctors, deans, lawyers, CFOs, CEOs, people who have their own companies, a lot of leaders, in other words. So that is definitely one of the areas where I've had these leaders come and they're working with their body, they're working with their energy, but they begin to have the understanding that everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start asking me questions, and literally they start to ask me about certain people on their team, certain dynamics that are going on. And in that way, I'm like an interventionist, because I will literally just be like, boom, cut to the chase. And I watch them have like this aha.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's one thing spouting off a teaching like I did here today in some ways where we're hinting to certain things. It's another thing to be working directly with someone, know when to enter, and you sort of enter in. And in that moment of entering in, it breaks the loop, whatever loop they were in, and they have like this aha. And then they say, for example, they always ask me, how did you know that? But it's called awareness. It takes time. But as you grow your awareness, you can do that with people, and then you help them, they help somebody else. Anyway, so those folks are definitely one category of people that have been in the background of my life for 25, 30 years, working with me regularly, and have had some great successes physically, but also with companies, turning things around, selling things they couldn't sell, all these different kinds of ideas like law of attraction type stuff. But how do I make the change inside myself that then changes the outer world? That's like my expertise. That's what I love playing with and experimenting with. So that has always been something. And the reason that I really love working with those people is that unlike the average population, which that's my second population, because I want to work with everybody.
Yeah.
So the lay people and the people who don't really know that much or didn't even go to college or whatever the thing is, I don't care. Awareness lives in them. The light lives in them. I want to help them too. But the difference between the two audiences is that these leaders, these people, we'll just call them leaders in all those different professions and so on. They're motivated. They went to school. They got the degrees. They're going to get on an airplane. They're going to fly all the way over here to Wilmington with me to have a private retreat and spend X amount of money to be with me for 8 hours. They want to get it done. When I share some kind of homework and they have an aha, they are going to go home and they're going to do that homework. They're going to follow up 1 month later, 2 months later, 3 months later. I have some people I've been coaching for 20 years. And they're still following up with me because of what they had happen along the way. That's that category of people. Motivated, driven, want to learn. They're open. They're ready to go to the next level. And they have to be that. If they're not that, I cannot do with everybody what I can do with that group. That group, boom, we can go because they're ready and they want to and they're hungry. Now, the other audience, the other group, and this could even include some of those leaders, but even if it's the lay person, but it could also include a leader. When somebody's lost their job, when somebody's financial situation is cracking, when the world around them either is or has crumbled, it hurts like hell and it sucks on the level that it does, but they're open in a way that they don't even realize. And so when they show up to a Qigong program or something or healing work, and even if they're down to their last $100 and they spend it to come to whatever 2-hour event I'm doing or something, all those people are amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing because they are broken. And a lot of people don't understand that in order to be built back up, a lot of times you have to be broken. I'm not saying everybody does, or you should go out and try and be broken. But if you are broken and you're breaking, that is a beautiful opportunity to rise from those ashes and rebuild yourself. So those are the categories of kind of people that I work with a little bit. It's a little bit of what I'd say there.
I love that. I'm aware of your time. We've been chatting for like almost an hour and 15 minutes, and I could go longer, but I want to be, aware of your time. And where can people can reach out to David through our website, themokshagroup.com, if you want to bring him in or us together for a retreat and just support your team. And how I really like is like weaving those practices in through the day to create these pattern interrupts and manage that energy and shift it prior to those important conversations. And so that's an option. But you can also, David, if you would reach out or you would share the best way for people to reach you through your own company, and also share any events coming up that people can join in on.
Yeah. So first of all, we have an event coming up this upcoming weekend, actually, this next Saturday. So not sure when this will be live, but we have a series of these. There's a foundation called the Love, Peace, Amen Foundation that has actually sponsored some free events. So we have one coming up this weekend. It's a Qigong for Beginners program. It's 2 hours Saturday, 10 to 12. But then next year, there's like another 4 programs that company's putting on. That's a great way, and it's free to the public, which is literally amazing. So that's really awesome. And then, of course, we have an array of different things because we offer certification programs to become certified Qigong teacher, certified medical Qigong practitioner, and then we have everything for lay people and so on. But what I'm also doing here with Sheila and Ryan and some of the others at Moksha is bridging over into some of these other audiences that want to bring this into the workforce and the workplace. And one of the things that I do and have done, because one of the questions I realized I didn't answer that you asked, in terms of how I work with a group, it had a flashback to working in Boulder, and I still do this a lot, but if I'm teaching a Qigong class, I tell people all the time, I'm not teaching you aerobics, number one. Number two, I'm not just teaching you Qigong. I'm like a Dr. Joe Dispenza. Mm-hmm. I'm like a Tony Robbins, but I'm like an Eckhart Tolle. Mix those people together and you're getting closer to like what I'm more like. So because I'm not just one size fits all, here's Qigong. Because I tell people all the time, just Qigong in the park, it's not enough. You have to have the science, the philosophy, the understanding. How do I use it? When do I apply it? So I'll give you an example. I would have people walk into the training space and I would give them an acting role. I'd say, here's your acting role. We'd have X number of people practicing Qigong. The person who's going to be the actor or the actress, they would go outside the room. And I would speak to them and I would say, I want you to come in the room and I want you to tell a story about something, anything you can think about that really like has upset you recently. And I want you to be as negative as possible. But don't be too loud or aggressive, but I want you to be negative. I want you to use some negative language and so on, right? You see me laughing already. It cracks me up. So they come in. And the short version of it is, what I started to teach the students, I showed them the wrong way first. The wrong way, so to speak. What does everybody do? I walk into the room, I immediately start talking negative. What do? You hold your breath. Mm-hmm. I taught my class. As soon as that person walks in and starts talking negative, I want you to go like this. Waterfall. I want you to breathe it all in, and I want you to exhale it. And then I don't want you to stop. I want you to keep breathing in and exhaling. And I'll tell you what happens every time. What happens every time is that the actress, even if they're good and they come in on a really negative bent, they will start laughing. They lose their grip and they cannot stay negative with all these people breathing it in and alchemizing it. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you have to stop in the middle of your Qigong class and you have to say, we're going to take this and train it in such a way, just like we would in martial arts. Mm-hmm. It's great to do all this, ha, ha, ha. But usually people jump out from behind a corner.
Right.
So we have to learn to turn and face what's behind the corner, right? So we have to make it practical and applicable. So that's the kind of stuff that I do. And on the level that I am, that's my expertise. And I improv. You've seen me many times. I'm an improv master. I improv with the people and the energy in the moment so that I can speak to them, not just regurgitate something off of the shelf, some philosophy or some science that's blah, blah, blah. And I point to it on my overhead. Yeah. It's not me.
Yeah, I love that you do that so well. It's kind of got a seriousness to it, but also funny, and like it's like a safe place to learn. And so I do think like that application of, and even in the heart math science now, they actually show it. If instead of reacting, blocking, making that person the enemy, because I find like people will just shun that person, or they go into overcare, and then the whole group is dysregulated. And so even if we, there's many ways to do that. You do repeatedly find that people move towards more coherence when everyone else starts to do a practice at the second they are aware that someone else is kind of spoiling the space, even unconsciously. It's just kind of the habit. I want to end with one story. I think I wrote you, because I think when I first started studying with you, I like wrote you all the time, like my ahas and journeys, like things catching on fire and me holding my center, or, different things like that. But one really powerful story you told as the ending story was, you had talked about in our class, I think you like knew what was going to happen to me. I'm not sure, but you were in a park running and there was a dog that almost attacked you. And you brought up you pulled your chi in and you brought up some healthy dominance, and you like stopped this dog attack. And as a social worker, I experienced like working with a lot of people in the inner city who had been attacked by like pit bulls, like shoulders, pulled off. And so I always had this kind of fear of these loose dogs. And so I'm in Tennessee with my extended family, and I'm, doing a lot of Qigong or practice at the time, going through I consider like these initiations in a way. And I'm walking and I'm alone, which was a fear. Cause again, part of the story I share is that I, share with the world is that in my family, there's been a lot of violence towards women and sexual assault. So that's an edge for me. Anyway, I'm working to release that history that is in my genes, DNA. And so I'm walking, and the next thing I know, I'm already kind of afraid. I see this pit bull. This is like a month after I went to your training, tracking me.
I remember. Mm-hmm.
And there was this second where I was holding my own, doing my Qigong. And then I like, in a way, I think if I remember your words, like in a way, I shifted from that confidence, that chi of holding, to a fear state. And the second I shifted, I felt it. That animal felt it. And it charged me with it, because I didn't have enough practice probably under my belt. But I remember what you said. I looked around, there was nowhere to go. I pulled in all this chi and I turned around behind me, because I couldn't run away. And I like went after that dog the way you taught, in this strong, dominant way. And this dog like was so shocked. It tucked its tail and it kind of laughed and ran. And never saw that dog again. No one else claimed that dog. It was really interesting. And I went to the Airbnb afterwards we were staying at, and there was a picture of a pit bull, raged, teeth out on the wall. And I just thought it was so crazy. But it was the first time that I wasn't that I felt a pause before going into fight flight. That I didn't feel kind of victimized in that moment. And I think it's because, one, of the story, but two, because I had finally had enough chi in my system to act on some wisdom, something different. It felt, even though I was in this aggressive, protective stance, I felt powerful in a way that felt healthy. And that, I think that was because of my chi practice. So if you can wrap us all up after that share, I would love that to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I would wrap up with, the way that I would wrap it up, is that, again, the philosophies, the science, these are helpful to understand. They're also fun sometimes to have a conversation over a podcast, have a conversation over tea. But what we're really looking for is we're looking for the embodiment and the experience of these things. And we're looking to be able to actually practically apply them in our life so that we have tools. We go into the toolbox. The screwdriver is not going to work on everything. The hammer is not going to work on everything. We have to have a toolbox that has all these different tools, and we have to know how to use each one and which environment should I use this one in. And to begin with, it's a jumbled mess. We don't know. But like martial arts, for example, somebody grabs your wrist. That's very different than if somebody grabs you by the hair. That's very different than if somebody tries to grab your foot or push you or whatever. Each situation has its own response. And again, this is another, could be a tangent, but I'll say it as simple as I can. Meditation and some of these other practices of centering, like Qigong is a form of meditation. It's about finding and discovering center. Center would also be like being on a high wire and finding your balance. A little bit this way and you fall off, a little bit that way and you fall off. If you become too attached to the falling off to the left or falling off to the right, you're just constantly off center. You have to learn to be in center, and then from center, apply your tools, apply your techniques. But the waterfall, and the reason you mentioned it, okay, is we have, 60 techniques in our program, let's say. Why did you mention waterfall as one of them? Because you see it over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. It's easy, yet there's different levels to it, but anybody can do it. And it's always something you can come back to. And even if you forgot all the other techniques, it's something you can count on. And in fact, I had a woman just share in the Qigong class. I had her share it with the Qigong class. She had just gone to she's one of our level teachers. She's like a level 3. She just went into the doctor's office. She's like 70-ish. And she went into the doctor's office and her blood pressure was up like 40 points. And she practiced the waterfall, and the next thing you know, down 40 points it came. And the doctor literally said, because the doctor said, I'll leave you for a few. She asked the doctor, could you leave me for a few minutes? The doctor left, came back, did it again. The doctor said, what did you do? She said, Qigong. The doctor said, will you teach it to me? She ended up teaching the doctor how to do that technique. So we need practical, applicable techniques that we can bring into these environments that we're living and working in. Why? Because we spend most of our time there. We're not all on vacation. We're having to work and do all these things. So we need these tools to bring into our life, because times will continue to be hard. That's life here. It's just how it is. So we have to just have the tools. It makes it easier. It makes it more smooth, and will increase the enjoyment in somebody's life if they can more smoothly and more easily blend with what's going on. But if we have the idea of a very airy idea of blending, I'm going to blend. Well, then we're just a leaf in the wind and we get blown everywhere.
Right.
So what I would bring to people, and what I do bring to people, is we got to find the middle ground. And then if you need to step up to deal with a pit bull, then you have the energy and the mentality and the embodiment of that. And if you need to have compassion for somebody who doesn't like you, then you have the tool for that, the practice for that, and the feeling in your body of what it feels like to have compassion. And then you know where the confidence comes from? You have compassion for your neighbor who doesn't like you. And then your neighbor all of a sudden is like acting like they're your best friend. And you literally realize how powerful your practice of compassion is. That's the experience I would love everyone to have.
Oh, I love that. And, one of the other gifts I think you have, when I've shared some of the keto that you practice as well, and even some of the martial art that you bring in, the power of like doing something with force and strong in the right way, that's really powerful too, because it's a way of moving energy quickly. And so I think you also have this gift. Some of the companies I work with, their leaders travel all over the world, and they can be kind of targets, right? And it's stressful for them as they travel. And so I've also know companies are starting to bring in more kind of safety and empowerment training around being alert, being aware of your environment, using the least amount of energy. And so I've also just wanted to mention that to those listening, that there's this element of kind of personal safety in a way that I've benefited and gotten stronger from, how you teach not only that awareness, but also what energy we're unconsciously sending based on kind of, what we've inherited, our experiences are, and that we don't have to kind of keep emitting that same energy, because then we unconsciously are, attracting that energy. And so, yeah, you have so many tools to offer folks. I'm grateful that you're still teaching, and you're so also generous with your YouTube channel and your time. And so if you are interested in becoming, I think it would be great to have like Qigong certified people who work in corporate America, because one group I was leading, there were 60 people and we were doing Qigong, and there were a few of the PhD scientists in a, not mind body work, who were a little hesitant, but they did it anyway. And then one of the guys who was most grumpy, came back the next day and announced to the whole group that after one 30-minute practice we did, his blood pressure for the first time. He was on maximum amount of blood pressure medicine. He was always up. He could not believe not only his blood pressure, but also his glucose tests were very different after his first one and only Qigong practice. And that really inspired the group. So one of my goals is maybe to partner with you someday in creating a certification program just for corporate people who are going to apply and teach the right practices in these smaller amount of times in the corporate setting. Because you can't always bring external people in, but we can kind of help people develop the skills that they can kind of lead their own people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have people that are doing that too. And it's, again, it's much needed, because the obvious, when you look at it, is the majority of us have to work. We're driven to work. The whole system is driven in that way. And the more pressure that happens with inflation and this, that, the other thing, the more that everybody's driven to make money and so on. And so many people will try and have prosperity without peace. And if you honestly look at it, peace is the greater path first. Then if you're motivated and inspired to go do a particular type of work, make money, etc., just being driven, I mean, more people, not everybody for sure, but more people are starting to realize there's enough stories out there. Yeah, they made the money, they did this, and then they died. They had a heart attack. The Dalai Lama makes jokes about this, not like mocking people, but trying to bring some humor to it. You spend your whole life sacrificing your health to make money and have material things. And then once you have money and material things, you no longer have your health. And then your health starts to demise, and then you have to sell your wealth and your material things to get your health back. And then all you're concerned about is, I hope I can live another 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's an insane cycle. And so rather than just giving everything up and becoming Buddhist monks, another path is to bring the practices to your home. And then from your home and your private space, you can and people, I don't have time. You can create time. The more time you create for yourself, the more time you will have in your life. The more space you create in yourself, the more time you will have. So if you bring that into your home, and then you bring it into the workplace, and you keep doing it for a little while, you'll immediately see the results. 9 out of 10 people will go back to doing the same stuff they did before. They'll forget about it. But at least they will have a memory that says, man, I'm messed up all over again. I need to go back and do that Qigong practice. I need to go back and do that meditation practice. And only over years does a person maybe get to half of what I'm doing, where they go, man, I just need to keep doing this all the time, because, otherwise it's just something sitting on a shelf. And then whether we call ourselves a leader or not, we become a leader, because whether you're a nurse working in the hospital, or you're this woman who's one of our teachers who teaches in different places around town, and then just shows up, and the next thing you know, she's teaching her doctor. That's just like a random serendipitous, happening. Yeah. Because she changed her blood pressure.
He's curious. Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, I think the last really message I want to impart, as healer types, one thing that shifted me is like, you can do a lot of healing in the world if you can just walk on the earth gently with that peaceful heart. I think you call it peaceful warrior, but a form of like activism. Sometimes I have to roll back like activism mindset to say, that what can I offer the world that it really needs? And oftentimes it's just getting my energy right, my chi field right. And if I just show up, I know when working with you, when I've amplified my energy to a certain degree and you've done all your work and other people have done all the work, and then we all come together, my body, as a cranial sacral therapist, I see this as well. If we're resourced and we join someone else's inner physician, their inner healer, they'll speed up their evolution process, their healing process, just like, right? They can reach something because we've just shown up resourced. And so I just want to bring that back to how when we first started talking, like, I think like if you strip every other event of trying to like, make the world better, and you spend time just getting your energy coherent, full cup, everything kind of will stem from there with more success. I know it has, and no one I do remember, and I do those practices. It's not like I have to fight to create the outcomes I want. They're just, they're more fluid. And then people kind of want to be around because they start moving just in your presence without you even saying too much,
Yeah, and what I would just add there as well, something that we talked about when we were talking about doing the podcast, be my concluding comments, especially for the men, not for the ladies, for most of the women, they can really resonate. Those that are looking for this kind of thing, they can really resonate with what you just spoke to. For the men that are like, okay, what's this? I just want to reiterate, black belt in karate, black belt in Kempo karate, black belt in Taekwondo, Jeet Kune Do, Filipino martial arts teacher, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, Aikido practitioner of many years. And just like what you learned from me with the dog, there are times to actually say not only no, but hell no. There are times to practice compassion, and there are times to practice a slightly more strong and sturdy boundary, because you're not up to compassion in that moment. And then you're going to go home and practice your compassion, and you're going to go home and do your Ho'oponoponos. So I myself, if somebody said to me, we're going to strip you of your, your martial qualities and so on, as we discussed on the phone before the podcast, many men are like, oh, hell no. No, you're not going to get me to drop my guard, go become a Buddha. There's a reason that they're guarded and protecting themselves. And so like when I go into a jiu-jitsu class where we're going to spar every class, we're going to go at it every single class. For example, I cannot go in there and be too in my heart and like out there expansive compassion, because literally I might break something, or they might break one of my bones. So, but what's interesting is if I go in and I'm too rigid, I'm just as easily going to get hurt and break something or injure something. So finding the in-between is a dance, and it can only be taught to you, as best I can say that succinctly and simply, it can only be taught to you by somebody who's danced it for a long time. Otherwise, I'd just be philosophizing with these guys. And as you know, I do amazing work with the ladies, but it's very heart-centered with the ladies. No problem. Almost all of you can just, boom, we go right there. We go right there. We go right there. But with a lot of these men, especially in leadership roles, they need to understand that it's also okay for them to be alpha wolf, and it's okay for them to have certain language and body posture and so on. But can we also tone it down? Can we dance? Can we bring a little heart into it? Find a better dance with it so that it's not so destructive to the self, and it's also not destructive to the people that we're working with.
Yeah. And I do think, that's a good point. There's more stereotypical gender roles, whether they're innate or they've been forced upon us. But I'm actually seeing more and more men also seeking that softness, and then more and more women who've kind of shifted into that more dominance, because that's like how they learned they have to be whole by adopting some of that patriarch. Just saying like, okay, now this isn't working. It's coming at great personal cost. So how do I act and be heard you know, how do I keep my heart that's so maybe easier to be open, but also be heard? And I think women are also wanting to feel like that power without being referred to HR or being, you know, internalized as bad or abusive. And so I think that's a dance too. And I think of these next 20 years, you know, all the evolution around gender and the roles changing and stuff, this is a dance that I think we're going to be doing in, you know, in new ways.
Absolutely, and you bring a valid point that could open Pandora's box as well.
Yeah.
But I'll say briefly because it's such a great point. Is that the women who are going into the workplace, which is not my typical category of all the women that I'm referencing, are healers, acupuncturists, massage therapists, psychotherapists, you know, so on. But these women that you're pointing out that are working in that workforce, they would benefit greatly from some of these practices that you referenced with the dog energy and working literally with an imaginary sword, which is an extension of your own mind, and understanding that kind of practice. So like I said, it's a dance. We don't want to be, at least in my teaching to people, because it's how I live. I'm not interested in being too soft. I'm also not interested in being too hard. And I do my best to dance with this very elusive, tricky place called the middle.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it's been an hour and a half or more. And I know you have some world work to do as well. I want to thank you, David, for reaching out or saying yes, basically, to this invitation. I can't wait till we get this out into the world. If you want to learn more about David, you can find him on our website, themokshagroup.com or qigongawareness.com to contact him through his organization. If you like these type of videos, we're brand new. Please push like or subscribe. It'll allow our channel to grow and bring more awareness in the world. Thank you so much. And we look forward to connecting next time.
Thank you so much, Sheila.
All right. Thanks, David.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
I will.